Hey guys, it's Kevin again here to review the Season 4 premiere of The Boys. And obviously, I was hyped for this season. I finally got a chance to review Season 3 and Gen V leading up to this, and just watching both of those back-to-back, rewatching The Boys and watching Gen V for the first time, it just really amplified my need for Season 4. I already was really hyped for it, but especially watching those back to back and just seeing how well they connect to each other, but also opening so many possibilities for season 4. I was just so hyped to see how this was all going to go down, where they were going to go with this season. It seemed like there were so many different avenues they could take things, and I was just really excited to see what exactly they were going to do moving forward in this show, especially now knowing that, you know, The Boys is ending very soon. This is the second to last season of the show. Things are really going to start getting dire. Things are really going to start being set in motion for the end game, and I was excited to see how things were going, how they were going to, you know, start getting us closer to that end point. And so I will say this right now, just because of the fact that I'm covering 3 episodes of television in this video, I'm going to structure this video a little bit differently than you're maybe used to. I'm not talking about all 3 episodes at once. Instead, what I'm going to do is, as of recording this video, like right now, I have only seen episode 1. I have not seen episodes 2 and 3. Eventually, I will have seen episodes 2 and 3, but I'm basically going to be filming this as I have finished each episode. So if something happened in episodes 2 or 3 that either contradict what I said or end up, you know, not being, or I give something that might be an issue in an episode and then that's resolved by the next one, I haven't seen it yet. So that's why I didn't bring it up, and you guys will see that throughout this video. I feel like that's the best way to go about it. That's the best way from keeping this video from, 1, being really scattered, 2, being really long. I think that's the best way to go about it. So we're just going to go ahead and get right into it. Starting off with episode 1. Alright, so I have just finished watching episode 1 of The Boys Season 4, and I will say, this season definitely feels very different in a lot of ways. Yes, there's a lot of things that feel like, you know, that's like pure nature of The Boys, the, you know, diabolical and just unhinged and relentless nature that the show has always had. That is continued in the show. But the one thing I will say, and this is something I did kind of expect, but really is further confirmed in this season, things just feel so much bigger this time around. I mean, there's so much going on this season, and the one issue I will get right out of the way is that I think there might be perhaps a little too much going on in this season, but we'll dive deeper into that a little bit later. Either way, I'm really interested to see where this is all going to go. I think there's a lot of interesting arcs that's being set up here, and I think even though there are some things I'm a little bit worried about, if they are heading in the direction I think they are, this could potentially end up being the best season of this show to date. But we're going to go ahead and just jump right into it right now. So, like I said, there's a lot going on in this episode, and because there is, I'm going to try to divide this as neatly as I can, talking about what went on with the boys first, and then I'll talk about everything going on with the Supes, mainly Homelander, because the other ones don't really have a ton going on right now, but we'll talk about that. I think we'll just start off talking about the first scene of this episode, the way everything was handled. I was not expecting them to go in the direction with Newman that they did in this season. I thought for sure that Newman was going to be kind of in a similar vein to like a Soldier Boy or someone like, you know, a Stormfront, where she's going to be this like huge threat that they need to take down immediately, and that's what they're doing at first in this first scene. They're trying to do what they can to neutralize her, but we see that she has, you know, they try to throw acid in her face, that doesn't work. They try to shoot her in the face, that doesn't work. So she might potentially be invulnerable. This is something that MM has looked into, and they think that's a possibility. And so I think that overall is really interesting. But what I like even, and then you also have her daughter Zoe, who I can't believe I didn't talk about this in season 3, but as we know, she gave her a very painful dose of Compound V, and as a result, she's now a soup, like full-on soup. She's like almost looked like Medusa with like what her power was. I mean, it was insane the way that all went down. So I'm really interested in getting into that. But the thing I think that was even more interesting to me is the fact that I also somehow left this out, that she holds that virus, the one that Shetty from Gen V was going to end up distributing, was going to make airborne. Newman is the one that is in, she now has the power to that. She has access to that. And so as a result, she kind of now is someone that they might begrudgingly have to work with. And this is something that Butcher notes immediately. When he's talking to her, I was not expecting him to go in this direction where he tells her, like, yeah, I know about the virus, I know everything that's going on, and it seems like the two of them are potentially going to team up. He talks about how I think we need to be on each other's side because that virus might not be able to kill Homelander yet, but it could. And that is such an interesting idea to me. That is the perfect way to integrate a plot point from a spinoff and perfectly weave it into your show, but not do it in such a way to where it feels like Gen V is taking over the boys. It just, Gen V, it happened, and that virus, I guess I just didn't think about the fact that, like, that can change a lot. The idea that this virus is still out there and Newman is the one that holds it, Butcher is recognizing this, and Butcher thinks that maybe there's a potential that they could, potentially, put an end to Homelander if she's able to develop that virus. And so she makes this deal with him where it's like, all right, I will help you, further develop this virus if you are able to take this drive from Huey that has evidence of her at the Red River group home. We're not entirely sure what's there and what that's really all about. But I mean, I'm really interested to see where they are going with her as a character. She's clearly going to be a far more prominent character this season. And the thing about Newman that I think is so interesting already is just how manipulative and cunning she is, even more so than Homelander, because she is someone that has history with some of these characters. That moment with Huey where she's telling him that she like generally cared for him, at first I kind of bought into what she was saying, but seeing what she's doing with Butcher now, she clearly has her own agenda. She's all in this for a political gain. That's what this has always been about for her. She doesn't even really want to be the vice president. She clearly wants to go after Singer to then become the president herself. She wants all that power, and I'm just really interested to see how this is all going to go. I feel like Butcher is now so focused on this virus and wanting to do what he can to benefit from it, and, seeing his rage and hatred and everything he's been through. Where is that all going to go? I think is a really interesting idea, but we also got to go back to that conversation he has with Kessler in this first episode where he tells him, like, hey, I think you need to focus on that greater evil in Homelander. You can't focus on Newman. He saw Newman as the enemy at first, someone that needed to be wiped out immediately. And you see, Kessler's like, pump the brakes a bit. Let's get back to, your main mission here. It's always been about Homelander. So I'm wondering if they're heading in this direction where them not being able to kill Newman is going to have like drastic consequences, because just seeing her capabilities, the fact that she is basically unstoppable at this point, it really makes me interested to see where they are heading with her. I mean, Butcher was this close to sending her that drive, and the thing that ultimately stopped him was the vision of Becca telling him, remember, making sure that Ryan has the best life, trying to make yourself a better person. I'm really interested to see where Butcher is headed this season, because I feel like he really is in this position. He's going to go rogue at some point. We've already seen him go rogue before, but I feel like he's generally trying to become a better person. He's trying to make things right. There are so few people. You do see hints of him trying to become a better person. The way he is trying to, get Ryan back on his side, the way he shows this concern for Huey with this health scare, but yet everything he's doing has his own selfish motivation. He wants Ryan back. Does he want Ryan back truly because he wants to be a father to Ryan, or is it just so he can be the father to Ryan and not Homelander? He is, showing concern for Huey, but is it just so Huey continues to defend him and so he can just take hold of that drive? So I think that's what's so interesting about Butcher, is that everything he does has his own sort of motivation to it, and I think this season, a Butcher that is practically completely alone, like basically everyone's given up on him. I mean, what Mallory says to him in that scene where she says, like, there are people who are going to feel that you still have value, but they're dumbfounded for thinking that. I mean, that just shows it right there. Butcher has lost so much of the position that he once had. He doesn't have people rallying for him anymore, except maybe Huey. And so I'm really interested to see what that is going to look like. Is he going to remember all the things that Becca told him? Because I don't feel like this is going to be the last we see of that Becca, Becca in Visions. I think he's going to continue to think about her and think about all the things that, think about her dying wish of making sure that Ryan's okay and protecting him at all costs. But is he, but knowing Butcher, is he going to give into his temptations and sidestep that mission, or is he going to generally try to redeem himself? I'm really excited to see how this all plays out, and I think there's some really great stuff on the horizon for Butcher as a character. So I feel like for him, working with the enemy like Newman is enticing, because it's like, okay, well, we have this common enemy of sorts, but he also needs to consider just how dangerous she really is. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how this all really does play out. Is Butcher going to continue to go down this dark path, or is he going to be able to redeem himself and finally stop himself from making reckless decision after reckless decision? Is he going to not fixate so much on this virus? The thing is, knowing Butcher, I feel like he will. I feel like he knows that this virus is out there. He's gonna do what he can to take a hold of it, to use it to his own, to use it for his own, his own agenda. And I'm just interested to see how that is all going to go down. I wasn't expecting them to go in this direction with Newman, where she could become this ally of sorts for the boys, but probably, for Butcher, but probably having some own dangerous plan of her own, especially, again, knowing just how powerful she is. I'm just really interested to see what they're going to do with her. Claudia Doumit also just doing such amazing work. She always has in this show, but this season in particular, I mean, just the confidence and the manipulation tactics she just does such a great job of doing that, because she does it with such this like feigned sincerity, to the point where, like I said, even I was buying into stuff she was saying at first. But now, seeing what she's all about and seeing how this is all played out, I really do feel like Newman is going to be doing some very, I really feel like Newman is going to do some really heinous shit this season, even more so than we've seen before. Like, the head popping is going to be nothing compared to what she's going to do, and I have no idea how that's all going to play out. But I also could potentially see an arc where Butcher does end up working with her. I think he could definitely go down that path, because like I said, he doesn't really have many people that actively trust him right now, so why not work with the enemy at that point? So I don't know how this is all going to go down. I think there's a lot of interesting places they can take that arc, but I'm very interested to see how that's all going to play out. Now, as far as the rest of the boys go, everyone does have their own individual plotline going on this season. For one, you have MM, who has now been upgraded to the leader of the boys, and I mean, I think this makes sense. He is by far the one that is the most sound out of all of the members. He is the one that is the most level-headed. He's the one that seems to have the biggest conscience, but the problem is now, anything that the boys do, he has to be the one to answer to that, and we'll see how that is going, but already you can see it's not going great. They're constantly, the government agents are constantly blaming him for things, this failed assassination attempt, and I feel like we're going to see things get a lot tougher for MM, and is he going to be able to separate what's going on with his daughter as well? Because we find out Janine is acting out in school because Todd's not around and she misses his presence within the house, and so I'm really interested to see what his role is going to be. I feel like he is very much the moral compass of the group at this point, and I'm interested to see, what this now, what this upgrade means for him. What does it mean that now he is in this position? Is he really going to be able to handle it, or is he going to crack under pressure and end up giving it back to Butcher? I don't know how that's all going to play out moving forward, so I think that's a really interesting plot line. What they're doing with Huey as well, I think is also really interesting. We're diving deeper into his, parentage and kind of his issues with his father. We know in season 3 he talked about how he's starting to see his father in a more positive light, but that does not necessarily mean he has the closest relationship with him. And so when his father, leaves him this voicemail, Huey immediately, like when his father tries to call him, Huey immediately just dodges it and then finds out his father now is having a stroke that might potentially kill him. And Huey's freaking out. He doesn't really know what to do, and really is trying to do what he can to reconnect with his father. And so that already is a plot line that I'm really interested in getting more into. I'm really happy Simon Pegg is back on this show. I feel like season 1 he had a pretty big role, and then since then we haven't really seen that much of him. So I think it's a good way to get him back into the show. But now also having his mom show up, I mean, what is their relationship like? How is that all really played out? I mean, it doesn't really seem like Huey is happy to see her, so I have to imagine that it's been mostly negative. But again, I'm interested in seeing where this is all heading with Huey. I think there are some things that they're diving into this scene that we really haven't explored with this character yet, and so I'm excited to see what they end up doing with that. But easily, and I feel like I say this every season, the most interesting storyline going on in terms of the boys, at least, is one of the most interesting storylines going on this season is everything going on with Annie. I love what they're doing with her, where she wants to abandon Starlight as soon as possible. Like any trace of Starlight, she just wants to stray as far away from as possible. And you can see how much harder that is for her because the media is now dubbing her as Starlight. There is now this complete split between her and Homelander. And you have one group that are, staunch Starlight supporters and referring to them as Starlighters. And then you have the Homelanders. And as much as she wants to try to shed that identity, you can see how much harder it's going to be for her. That scene where she's talking to those reporters or, journalists or whatever, and they're telling her that, her dressing up as Starlight will give her a lot more pull and will make sure that, this that would, and we'll make sure that Homelander is much closer to being guilty of the crime that he committed. You can see that this holds a lot of weight for Annie because, she associates Starlight with nothing but negative memories. A lot of turmoil, a lot of trauma has gone on surrounding that persona, and she wants to try to start anew as much as she possibly can. She's becoming this humanitarian of sorts, trying to use her powers for good, and so I really like what they are doing with her. I think it fits perfectly in line with what we've been setting up moving forward, but it's going to be the question, is she going to be able to fully abandon the Starlight moniker? I think it's going to be really hard for her to do so. I think she's trying to make as much of an effort as she can, but especially now that she has this much bigger backing on, she has this much bigger group of supporters on her side, but then also you have Firecracker who's in there saying the most ridiculous shit about Annie, going on these far right rants about how the person who threw this bottle at Homelander was bathing a child and things like that. By the way, Valorie Curry is killing it in that role, just fully leaning into the lunacy of that character so incredibly well, and really just satirizing those ridiculous podcasters we see that spew this ridiculous shit. I think she's doing a great job with that. But what does that mean for Annie as well? Because you have just as many people that are defending her as there are people targeting her. So I don't think this is going to be as easy as she thinks, and I don't think Annie thinks it's going to be easy, but I think that she wants, but I think her, this whole thing, it's going to be really tough for her. Is she going to be able to fully abandon that persona? She doesn't want to be referred to as Starlight anymore. She just wants to be seen as Huey's girlfriend and, a member of society who's trying to like do good. And I'm interested to see how that all is going to go. How is what Firecracker and others are doing, how is that going to impact her image, and is she going to be able to recover from that? That's something I really like that they're doing already this season. I think that's a really interesting idea. The one plot line I'm really interested about, but I'm not entirely sure how I feel about it, is what they're doing with Frenchie. I like this idea that Frenchie has this boyfriend that might have this shady sort of side to him that he's not entirely sure of. He ends up saving him during the January 6th attack, or the show's version of January 6th attacks and things like that. And I like the way that all plays out. The problem is we haven't really heard about this character until now, so it just felt kind of abrupt to me. I didn't really understand like where this character came from, and so I hope that they dive deeper into what's going on there and not try to act like this character has been there all along. I don't think they will. It's just one of those things where like it just felt so incredibly random. Like I said, I'm all here for Frenchie pursuing this newer relationship that we haven't seen before and diving deeper into that side of things that maybe we haven't gotten to explore with Frenchie, but I don't really love how abrupt it was in the episode. I don't love how, I don't know if it really had a place in this episode. I think they maybe could have saved that for episode 2 or 3, and I think that would have benefited that storyline just a bit more, because it just felt a bit tacked on overall. Like I said, I like what they're doing there. I just don't know if it had a place in this episode. Like, if you wanted to, I think them, having it in the next episode, I think that would have flowed a lot better, because there was already so much going on at that point that just adding on another plot point, it just felt like, okay, this is yet another thing we have to follow. So I think that, was just something that I hope they're able to dive into a bit more, and I hope we're able to get some really interesting stuff with Frenchie. Kimiko doesn't have like really much going on in this episode. I'm sure we'll see more from her in episodes 2 and 3, but here there wasn't really a ton for her to do. The thing I will say though is that I really like the new dynamic of the group overall, where most of them are completely against Butcher. They want him ousted from the team. He just keeps making things worse for them. Every mission ends up getting squandered because of Butcher, and the only person who seems to have any hope in him still is Huey. And I'm interested to see how long is that going to last. Is Huey going to be able to continually defend Butcher? I mean, you go back to the season 3 finale, they were ready to just like abandon him and let him die. They didn't care what happened to him, but Huey made it clear that like sometimes you need to save people that don't need saving, and that don't really deserve saving. And Huey, I think, is always going to have this admiration and this respect for Butcher because of the relation that they've had. But if Butcher starts to do like a bunch of shady and rogue shit behind his back, I mean, that could really change things real fast. So I'm really interested to see how long is Huey going to be able to defend Butcher, and how long is he going to be able to put up with everything that he's doing. Because right now he can defend him and say, yeah, I think Butcher has something to this team. He's very valuable. He needs to be here. But how long is that really going to last? I'm interested to see, especially with the changing dynamic, how that all really is going to play out. Now, on the 7 side of things, this is really where things get interesting, and I think gives us some of the most compelling stuff of the entire episode, because where they are going with Homelander right now is so interesting. After the events of, him killing someone in broad daylight, he is feeling this constant sense of melancholy and boredom, and just seems like he's constantly disassociating, and just really doesn't seem like he's into this anymore, and seems, he's just kind of worn out, and you kind of wonder what really is going on there, and you find out it's really because he doesn't feel that anyone is willing to stand up to him. Nobody's willing to call him out for anything. Nobody's willing to have any pushback whatsoever. He expected the crowd to be upset by what he was doing. He expected the crowd to turn on him, and the fact that they didn't upset him. And I think that's a really interesting idea for Homelander, where he's just fed up at this point. He doesn't like the fact that everything he does is seen with cheers. He wants people to be angry at him. He wants people to rile him up. He wants someone that challenges him. And when he hears about Sister Sage, he immediately takes an interest in that. And the scene between these two was by far the best scene of this entire episode. I love this exchange between these two characters because she calls him out for basically everything, talking about how he's upset that his father abandoned him, how he has this insecurity to him, how he constantly feels this need to be loved and it's not happening, and how he has these abandonment issues and things like that. She really just goes for the jugular there, and he lets her, and she's waiting for him to stop her. She's waiting for him to do what he's done to, like, Black Noir, or what he's done to, to what he did to Madeline in season 1. But I think Homelander is, finding this refreshing. He's never really had someone that has been willing to call him out. And I think Sage is such an interesting character in that way, because knowing that she is the smartest person in the world, she really is the first person that could directly challenge him. And we already kind of see hints of that in this episode, where she's talking about how, he's going to be annoyed by her causes and the fact that she's a black woman and things like that, and that she is taking, his spot and whatnot. And instead, you can see he's manipulating her causes against her. He talks about the fact that, like, well, you'll get to speak about that publicly, and you can see that this makes her feel good. But knowing Homelander, he has his own agenda here. He knows what he is doing, and I'm really interested to see how this dynamic really shakes things up, because A-Train's not happy that she's there. There's clearly some animosity between those two. The Deep and A-Train as well, like, we're just so against any new members whatsoever. Really interesting stuff they're doing with A-Train. You can see just how I think kind of fed up he is with everything that is going on, but yet still so obedient to Homelander. I mean, the scene where he tells the Deep to give A-Train a blowjob, the Deep wasn't going to hesitate. The Deep was just going to go for it just because Homelander told him to do it. And I think that's such an interesting idea. And even when he's telling the Deep and A-Train to, beat his two supporters with a bat senselessly to death, they don't hesitate. Even though they think he's joking, he says he's not, and they just go ahead and do it. And one of those supporters he does have them murdered does in fact end up being Todd. So while MM is on the search for Todd here, Todd ends up getting killed in the crossfire, and honestly, good riddance. I fucking hated Todd. He was this guy who was just so naive of what Homelander was doing, just constantly talking about the person that Homelander, spouting all this great stuff that Homelander was doing, while MM was trying to warn him about all the things and making sure that Janine knew who Homelander really was, and Todd was actively hurting her from doing that. So now with Todd out of the picture, Janine can have a better life, and Janine will now know the truth of what's actually going on. So as much as Janine is acting out because of Todd, I am not at all upset to see him go, and I think it makes sense that he gets killed by the person that he was worshiping and proclaiming to be this great guy. And so now having someone like Sister Sage in there who actually is going to think through what he's telling her, I think that changes the dynamic tremendously, because A-Train and the Deep, as he said, are kind of idiots that are just willing to do whatever. And so I'm interested to see how that all is going to play out. Can I also say Valorie Curry is incredible in this role so far. We've only seen a few scenes with her, but every time she is on screen, your attention is fully on her. She's just really leaning into this idea that she has this intellect that just challenges and opposes everybody, and is someone who is so direct and so blunt with what she says. And I find that to be such an interesting character, the way that she fits into the Seven. It's just something we haven't really seen before. Usually people are worshiping Homelander, begging at his feet, and this is really the first person that isn't Maeve or Starlight, who had legitimate reasons for calling him out, to direct, who he was angered by the fact they were calling him out because they ended up turning on him to directly challenge him. But their dynamic also is so fascinating to me because she kind of gives him this idea that he needs to be the savior. This is the way he's going to turn things around. Things need to get bad, and then he needs to be the one to save everybody, and that kind of needs to be his role. And it kind of makes me think about his scene, it kind of recontextualizing that scene in Gen V a little bit, where he calls out Marie for her actions. I wonder if he was doing that as this way to make himself look like the good guy in this situation, to where he is, rightfully calling out the person that incited this riot. He knows she incited this riot, and regardless if she did or not, he at least is calling her out, and he looks like the better guy as a result. And I think that's a really fascinating idea, and we see this basically go through because she incites this very January 6th type riot where both sides are going after each other. And things, get really bad, but it leads to Homelander, before that, Homelander was acquitted for his crimes, and, a part of me wished that we could have seen more of his trial, but it makes sense that we didn't, considering that he is so disillusioned by what's going on and doesn't really seem to be probably isn't putting much effort into his trial anyway, and so it makes sense that we didn't really see much of that. There's other things that we need to get through in this season, so I understand that we're moving past that, and I think we knew that he was going to be found not guilty anyway, so I don't think we needed to spend too much time on that. So I think all of that, like I said, is just really great. I love what they're doing with Homelander as usual, but bringing in Sister Sage really changes up the dynamic in a very interesting way, so I'm excited to see how that plays out. What's even more interesting to me, though, is his dynamic with Ryan right now, because there's two ways I look at this. On one hand, I do think that he is trying, because I talked about this in, my season 3 review. Homelander at this point has lost basically everyone that is close to him. He's fucked up every single relationship in his life, and it's all been due to his own actions. And I think Homelander is aware of that. I think he knows that, everything just keeps going wrong for him because of himself, because of the terrible things that he's doing, but yet he always has people on his side. So I do think on one hand, he is trying to maintain this relation with Ryan so he can turn him further against Butcher and have somebody on his side that's going to defend him and going to, want to work with him on his evil schemes. But then he has this line at the end of the episode where he says, we need to continue being closer together so we can basically become each other and we can just be one. And so it makes me wonder, what is that all about? We know that Homelander is terrified of aging. He's constantly finding these gray pubic hairs and things like that, and he's collecting them in a jar. He is getting wrinkles on his face. Like I said, he's continually disassociating. And so I wonder, is he trying to use Ryan as a host for potentially, finding a way to obtain his body and make sure that he can preserve his youth and not have to worry about aging? Is that really his plan here? I think that is a very fascinating idea and really does seem like something Homelander would do, but I also think that he's also just trying to turn Ryan against Butcher as much as he can. But we also see that's not really working, because Ryan straight up tells him in this episode, I don't want you to kill Butcher, and Homelander's trying to do what he can to get him to be upset and saying that you should be mad at him and all this stuff, and he did all these terrible things, and he's asking for Ryan's opinion, and Ryan isn't really saying much. So I think we're already seeing that Ryan doesn't really fit in here. He doesn't like how public things are. He doesn't like all the, brutal killings that are going on. He doesn't like any of the stuff that is going down right now. And I wonder if Newman's daughter is going to be a potential way for him to kind of recognize just the deadliness of the Seven and just how much he needs to escape and go back to Butcher. Because I do feel like him and Zoe having that brief interaction in this episode was not for nothing. I think we're going to see more of those two interact, and seeing that Zoe already is fully embracing her mother's worst traits I don't think they're going to have, I don't know how this is all going to play out. Is she going to try to, veer Ryan is she gonna try to kind of bring Ryan closer to the set, to Vought and all the things that they've been doing, or is Ryan going to immediately notice what's going on and he's gonna end up going back to Butcher? Because I do think the season is gonna end with him going back there. We can already see there's just a lot of hesitation, there's a lot of things he's not okay with, so I'm interested to see how that's gonna play out. I really like what they're doing with Homelander and Ryan so far, either way, and I'm excited to see how that plays out moving forward. I guess the only other thing to really talk about on the Seven side of things, we do get a brief scene with the Deep where we find out that Ambrosius is still alive. In fact, he wants to kind of veer away from the boys and just live this life with Ambrosius. And Tilda Swinton voicing Ambrosius was something that was definitely not on my bingo card at all when it came to the boys, but I am fully here for it. I really love just the dynamic between those two. I'm just hoping that the Deep is more this season than just used for comedic relief. I hope he actually has his own plotline going on, because I feel like at points they just don't really know what to do with that character, and I'm getting the sense they have a little bit more of an idea what to do with him, but I'm not entirely sure how that's going to play out. And then Black Noir too. I feel like they didn't really give us too much of an idea, other than now Black Noir is the complete opposite of the Black Noir that we've seen. This Black Noir does not shut up. This Black Noir is very vocal about how he feels. So I want to know more about, like, how did this all come to be? Obviously, Homelander killed the Black Noir that we know, but who is behind Black Noir 2? How did he come to be? How was Homelander able to cover all of this up? That's something I'm interested in diving into. I assume Ashley was very instrumental in that, considering, well, it's Ashley that we're talking about, but what really caused this Black Noir to end up within the Seven? I'm interested to see how that all ends up playing out. I will also say, like, humor-wise, I thought that this episode was so on point. The one moment with, like, MM and his computer, I thought was so funny, the way that played out. I thought that was really great. The political commentary as well, they're really leaning heavier into this season, and I think it makes sense, considering that one of our plot points is literally about someone trying to enter the White House and trying to stop them from doing so. I think it only makes sense for the show to dive deeper into that side of things. I don't think this is new for the boys. I think anyone who thinks it is really has not been paying attention to what's going on. The show is just kind of doubling down on it, and I think it makes sense that as this show gets more extreme and the conflict gets more dire, the commentary gets a lot more biting and sharper, and I think they did a really great job of that, particularly the stuff they did with Firecracker. I thought was just so on point in this episode, but also just, like I said, having a full-on, like, January 6th type event and things like that, I thought was just really well handled in this episode. It feels like it was all really well thought out. It doesn't feel like they're trying to tackle too much. It all just kind of fits in there, and I think they're doing a really good job with that. Overall, I really enjoyed this premiere a lot. I think there were a lot of things to really just get excited about. The parallels between Butcher and Homelander really just kind of continue to get closer and closer to reality. I mean, Becca literally says to Butcher in this episode, "Do not become Homelander," and he's like, not on that level yet, but he's a few notches away from just becoming almost completely from just completely betraying everyone in his life. And similar to Homelander, everyone that has trusted Butcher has gone away. All the bad things that has happened to Butcher, it's been because of his own actions. He had an opportunity to kill Homelander last season, and he didn't take it. Is he going to take it this time, or is he going to get too distracted by other things going on? Or is he going to realize that working with Newman isn't the right idea, and he's going to, find a way to get back into the good graces of the friends, of the people that no longer trust him? I'm interested to see how that's going to play out. And then on the, Homelanders, with some of the other characters here, what is going on with Frenchie's boyfriend? What is all of that about? I'm interested to see what we're getting into with that. What is Huey's relationship like with his mother? How is that going to all play out moving forward? When it comes to Annie, is she going to be able to maintain not being Starlight? And how is that going to affect her? When it comes to what they're doing with MM. Is he gonna be able to handle being the leader of the boys, or is the constant, pressure and just, constant sort of, constant anger directed at him, is that just going to become too much for him? Is he gonna be able to really be able to handle this role? Because I think he already is starting to crack, and I think he's holding it together now, but as things get more dicier for the boys, because let's face it, they're gonna continue to go after Newman. They don't want her to end up in office. They want to do whatever they can to avoid her from becoming a legitimate, having legitimate political power, because they now know how dangerous she is. Things are only going to continue to get dicier, and I think the thing that's so interesting about that is that Singer is working alongside the boys right now. He knows exactly what Newman is doing. He knows all the dastardly things that she has participated in. So again, how is this all going to shake out? Now, knowing that they are, knowing that Butcher is someone who is potentially, flirting with the idea of going rogue and working with her and, forming an allegiance with the person that they are trying to apprehend and make sure that she is, and do whatever they can to avoid her from ending up in office. How is that really going to complicate things? And then Homelander, like I said, so much compelling stuff going on there with him and Sister Sage. How is that all going to shake out? There's just so many questions that this episode poses, and that's really what a great premiere of a season can do. Like I said, the only thing that brings it down for me is that I just think sometimes there was just a bit too much going on. Some plot lines just didn't feel as dived into, but it's only episode 1, and there's so much more they can do with this season, so it's not really a huge issue for me. It's just something that, like I said, there were some moments here that I think they just need to do a bit more with. Action-wise, this episode absolutely delivered. The whole attack scene was just incredible. The way that all went down, you really just feel how dire things are for these characters. It really does feel like we are heading towards the end, just from this first episode alone. There's so many things they're kind of coming back to from season 1, especially when it comes to Huey and his father, and I'm interested to see how that all plays out moving forward. So overall, I still really love this premiere a lot. I like a lot of the different dynamics here. I like a lot of the ideas that they're setting up. And I really just like what they are doing with this season, what they are leaning into, the ideas that they're trying to kind of come across, the way they're tying Gen V in seamlessly. I think there's so much they're already doing right this season. So despite the fact that, like I said, I think this episode was a bit overstuffed at times, I'm still, completely hooked into this season. I love so much of what they are doing. I really like the way this season is diving into the idea of mortality and things like that. I think all of that is really interesting. The questions that they're posing, again, things just keep getting more complicated, and I think that, for a show like this, that really is how it should go. Things should get more dire. Things should feel a lot bigger, and that's exactly what is happening this season. The stakes are at an all-time high. There's so much going on for so many different characters. There's so much at risk for so many characters, and I'm just really interested to see how the rest of the season ends up playing out. I thought this was just a really great premiere overall. And I know I'm going on a long time because I still have 2 episodes to talk about, but I guess I'll just go ahead and give my grade for this episode. So for this episode, The Boys, Season 4, Episode 1, Department of Dirty Tricks, I am going to give it an A-. Alright guys, so I just got done watching episode 2 of The Boys season 4, and yeah, this was a fantastic episode. I will say right off the bat, there's still a lot going on here, but I feel like in this one, everything just felt a little bit more balanced. We got a little bit more of an idea of what all of these plot lines are heading towards, and things didn't feel as disconnected as they did in the last episode. So yeah, I really like where the season is headed so far, but I think, again, lots to talk about. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to talk about Boys stuff first, and then we'll talk about the 7 stuff, even though those are very much intertwining in this episode. I think just to, again, keep it balanced, keep it, from not being too sloppy. I think that's the best way to go about it here. I think the first thing to really talk about is really the dynamic with the boys, because this episode really kind of confirms the fact that it is seemingly irrevocably changed. Butcher tells them in this episode that he has this terminal, that he has 12 months to live, and he has this terminal illness and things like that, and he's not gonna make it. And while at first it seems like they are really, they're really sad for him, and they're really feeling a lot of sympathy, MM is fed up because he didn't tell them for 6 months, and he's actively been lying to them about what's been going on with him. Why has he been so distant and aloof? Why has he not been on the same page with them? Why has he not been, why has he been so careless with his decisions? It all makes sense now, and he's just on the brink where he's just kind of done with him. And it's really sad to watch because these two have had such a strong friendship throughout the show. And to see MM gradually turn further and further against him every season, to the point where by the end of this episode, as we know, he kind of just, calls it quits with their friendship. It's really devastating to watch, but it makes sense because Butcher has continually just, worsened things for this group. Butcher is the reason why things haven't been working out, because he has had these, he's had these plans that are just very dangerous and deadly and not super well thought out. And I love the moment in this episode where he straight up calls out Butcher and tells him all the things that he has done wrong, whereas Butcher's also calling out MM. And we find out in this episode that MM did not come back. I thought that he came back to the boys when he when he decided to retire and focus on being a dad and, reconnecting with Janine and things like that. I thought it was because of Soldier Boy and all the stuff that he was doing and trying to kind of, help his family legacy, get justice and things like that. But that's actually not the reason he came back. He came back because he was just hoping that it would be different this time. He was hoping that this time Butcher had changed and they could just have fun like the old days. And that moment really hits you because you realize that there are so many adventures that these two have had that we have not seen in this show when these two were at a good point in their life. Butcher wasn't always this vengeful. Butcher wasn't always this deadly. He wasn't always this thoughtless with his decisions. He was much easier to be around, and it really just showcases the tragedy of this show. Despite the fact that there's a lot of, this is a very wild and crazy show, there's a lot of sadness surrounding this season. And I think for Butcher, we're really starting to have this overarching theme, I think, for every character this season of facing your past and having to deal with the consequences. And I think for Butcher, there's just too much he's done for him to really come back from. And I don't know if these two are ever going to be on the same page again, but it was just really sad to see that all go down. I think that we can pretty much say that now, anything is possible when it comes to Butcher, because he's no longer a full-fledged member. He's no longer a part of the boys. He's in it for himself at this point. He, offers MM this chance to, just go on one last mission. Let's try to save Ryan. That's what we need to focus on. But MM doesn't think it's enough. It's too little. They need to be doing more than that. He's still just looking out for himself, because at the end of the day, yes, saving Ryan's important, but that's really just benefiting Butcher. That is making sure that he is the better father in this narrative, and MM sees through all of that. And so, again, it's just really sad to see, but it really feels like this is something that has been earned. We've seen MM consistently having to put up with all of Butcher's schemes, and he's just kind of over it at this point, and you can totally understand why. He has bettered himself, and he was on a path where he didn't even want to think about this anymore, and Butcher pulled him back into it and showed that he had not changed at all. But I don't know, I think Butcher is making a genuine effort to try to show that, he is in it for the boys. When, they're being attacked, he does end up being the one to, give the final kill shot and things like that. I think the thing is just MM and Butcher are on such different pages right now. MM doesn't want to just kill everybody. MM wants to do the logical thing, whereas Butcher wants to kill Sister Sage immediately and doesn't see any use to her, whereas MM does. And knows that they can use her intellect to their advantage. So again, I think it's a very interesting dynamic, but there's also such sadness to it that these two just cannot get on the same page anymore. That's actively hurting, it's actively hurting the group as a result. I really love the way the season is dealing with that theme of, trying to face your past and, change your past, change your past behaviors and rehabilitate yourself. I like what this season is saying about that, but it also is diving into how hard that really is. And I think Butcher, it's, out of all the characters, it's very much the hardest. He's definitely one of the characters where it is the hardest for. So I really like what they're doing with him overall. Now, as far as the rest of the boys goes, they're kind of off on this mission to figure out more about Sister Sage. They know that she is now aligned with the boys, and they know that, her being the smartest person in the room, she could be a very useful asset to them, and so they want to see kind of what she is all about. They end up going to this TruthCon, which is a full-on, alt-right conspiracy theory type thing where, just every possible conspiracy theory is being dished out. You have people saying the most, outlandish things. And again, like I said, the show is really leaning into the political commentary this season, but again, I think it just makes sense that as the show goes on, they're just gonna push it further, and I don't think they're doing it in a way where it doesn't have any substance in the show. I think it makes sense to have stuff like this in the show, just considering where everything is headed. I think it makes sense to push things in this direction. So I think that they did a really good job with that. But basically, they go to this con as a way to, try to, do what they can to find out more about Sister Sage and what she's really all about and how connected she is to everything. But also, they are trying to do what they can to help out Annie, who, like I said before, she's really having a hard time getting away from Starlight, and that's getting even more complicated because now Starlighters are the ones being framed for what happened in the attack in episode 1, particularly 3 black men are being, framed because of course they are for what happened in episode 1, and they have to do what they can to try to defend them. And we see that Firecracker is a really big part of this. I'll talk more about her in a little bit. I have some things to say about her and when we get to the 7 and things like that. But basically, we get this. Basically, what ends up happening is, they do end up, we find out that Sister Sage knew what was going to happen. She was one step ahead of them, and they almost end up getting attacked by this character, Splinter, who, oh my god, you want to talk about just classic The Boys, just being as wild and insane as possible. Look no further than what they did with Splinter in this episode. The idea of Splinter also, can I just say, is such a fun one. The idea that he can just duplicate himself and make all these copies and do whatever he wants. But again, because this is The Boys, they lean heavily into the crude and sexual side of him literally just human centipeding himself. Just scenes like that, that's why this show is just on another level. And I myself, I've seen some people say they are tired of the, crazy shtick and they want the show to kind of, scale back on that. But for me, that's the show's DNA. If they were to suddenly not be insane and just, I'm not saying every episode I want them to, but if they were to suddenly just stop doing things like that, it wouldn't be The Boys anymore. So I don't really understand why it's a problem that the show is getting more, why it's still doing all these wild and crazy things. I think that's just kind of what the show does, but it also, like I said, grounds it, it's always grounded it with such great character work, and it's not like they are compromising one for the other. If that was the case, I would say that, but there's some generally great character work. I would argue the most character work we've ever had going on this season. So, I think there definitely is still a purpose for it, and I didn't really have an issue with it in this episode. If they continue to maybe, every episode they try to do something crazy, then yeah, maybe we're gonna have some problems. But it's the fact that they're more sporadic with it, but every time they do something a little bit more shocking and gross. That's really just works well in the show. It's a working formula, and I don't think it has been played out at all so far. Honestly, as weird as it is, I don't even think it's as weird as The Boys has gotten. This is nothing close to Herogasm or what we got with I can't remember his name, but the guy who shrinks down and went into that guy's dick. Like, it's nothing compared to that. Like, this is still really fucking weird and out there, but it's nothing compared to that. So I feel like, again, it's just another example of just this show kind of doing what it does best, like shocking us in the times we least expected, and it honestly really did deliver for me. So I didn't really have a problem with that at all. But Splinter ends up attacking them, but like I said, Butcher does end up fending him off, getting in that final kill shot, and eventually, Firecracker ends up getting away. We'll talk more about her a little bit later. But the other big thing, but that's really the main stuff that's going on here. Annie does end up having her name cleared as well as her supporters' name cleared, and it seems like by the end of this episode, she is more willing to embrace being Starlight. She recognizes that there are people that generally love her, and even though she associates that name with a ton of misery and sadness, she herself is still willing to encourage it. She is realizing that she kind of has to. She's never going to be able to fully get away from it, and so I think she's going to get to a point in the season where even if she doesn't want to, I think she's going to start embracing, and we're already kind of seeing that here. So I like what they're doing with that plotline overall, and we'll talk more about what gets her to make that decision a little bit later, because I can't talk about that without getting into the 7. But the other things I really want to talk about are the other side stories going on in this episode, because I just felt all of them were a little bit more fleshed out this time around. When it comes to Frenchie in particular, I was way more into his storyline in this episode. I felt like we have a lot more of an idea of what they're trying to do, because he is in this relationship with Colin, but there seems to be some kind of a disconnect. Every time it seems like these two are about to get intimate or they're trying to be, together, Frenchie it's interrupted by, something that's going on with Frenchie, whether it's a work call, whether it's something else that's happening, and, I didn't really know where this was going to go, but we find out that in a past mission, Frenchie actually killed all of Colin's family before, and this is not something that he has told him. So yeah, it makes sense why Frenchie is grappling. It makes sense why he is backsliding in terms of his addiction. We see that he is drinking and doing drugs a lot more. So clearly there is, a lot more going on here than we thought. And again, it really, goes with that idea of facing your past demons. This is a wound that he didn't want to have to re-explore, but he's going to have to, and I'm interested to see how this is all going to go down for Frenchie. And then for Kimiko, she's kind of struggling with drinking, but also having these flashbacks of her past and things like that. And you can see that she's trying to use therapy to kind of escape, but it's not really working. It's not doing what she wants to do. The therapist is asking her questions that obviously are not going to have solutions, like when she's asking her about her speech therapy and things like that. That's not helping. So she's deciding that she's just going to go ahead and go after she hears about some human trafficking. She wants to go after them. So I'm interested to see where her plotline is going this season. I feel like we're going to see some really great stuff with Kimiko. And for me, her best stuff always dives into her past and all of the abuse that she has dealt with that's gotten her to this point. So I really like that we are going back to that this season. I'm interested to see how they're going to handle all that. And I also like their Kimiko and Frenchie's dynamic this season. While they kind of had this will they, won't they of them last season, this season it feels way more just like they've kind of just settled as friends. And I don't think they're going to abandon the will they, won't they at all. I think eventually we're going to see these two re-explore that. But I loved the scene, especially where Kimiko is talking about a sexual encounter that she had recently and encouraging Frenchie to, have sex with Colin and things like that. I thought that was a really funny scene, and again, just really showed how great that dynamic is. I really enjoyed those two a lot, and I like the plot lines that are going on with both of them. And then as far as Huey, we get a little bit more of an idea of how things are with his mom. Basically, she has not been in his life since he was 6 years old, and now she has unexpectedly turned up, and it turns out because she actually works for Vought, and she is connected to his father's medical billing, so she is the one that is responsible for that. And apparently these two have also been in contact for a while, so you can see that you can see that Huey is really struggling to figure out what to say to his mom, but he finally does go ahead and just tell her how he feels. And I feel like there is more to this, whether it's that something happened that caused her to leave, and we don't really know what it was. Maybe that, whether that be Vought, whether that be something that happened with his father. There's definitely more going on than what we think, and I'm interested. I really like that we are finally exploring this. I feel like this is a part of Huey that we haven't seen before. I've seen some people say that Huey's arc kind of end in season 2, and now that might be the case. I think that they are finding a way to do new things with this character still, despite the fact that maybe he isn't as prominent as he once was in the show. They're still finding a way to do interesting things with this character, and I think this dynamic is a whole different one than we haven't really explored before, so I'm excited to see how that all goes down. All right, but with that said, we got to talk about the 7, because once again, that is where the most interesting stuff is going down in this episode. Everything they're doing with Homelander and Ryan, once again, is so interesting to me. I love the way they're diving into this relationship. We're kind of seeing that Homelander is becoming more and more irrelevant. There's this scene where they are filming this movie, and Homelander is told that he is being de-aged, and, you know, they're not really able to capture him without that. So you can see, again, he's still struggling with the aging of it all, but you can also see he's really struggling with Ryan already, because Ryan is just not liking a lot of what is going on. He is being told that he needs to save somebody so he can, you know, fully join the 7 and be, you know, he can fully become loved by the public and things like that. And they do this whole thing where they're staging this scene for him to save this girl, and Homelander, as he typically does, ends up ruining it. He distracts Ryan, and it gets to the point where Ryan literally throws the stunt actor so far that he ends up killing him, and this has a huge impact on Ryan. He's very shaken by this, but of course for Homelander, who's a complete sociopath, has zero feelings towards him. So he's trying to instill this idea in Ryan that, again, humans are just like toys, and that's all they are, and he shouldn't really have any reaction to it whatsoever. But you can see that he is really struggling, and I think things are really already going to become very complicated for that dynamic. I think Ryan is absolutely going to turn very soon. I don't know when it's going to happen, but I don't think this is going to be working out, because he doesn't have that he doesn't have that complete remorselessness that Homelander does. He cares too much about what he's doing, and because of that, it's just not going to end up working out for him, and you can see that's already having a pretty profound effect on Ryan. So, I mean, Homelander can try all he wants, but I just don't think it's gonna happen. He's trying to help him out with, like, milkshakes and things like that, but it's just not gonna go down. It's not gonna work out well at all. So I like the way they're exploring that dynamic. I do worry that they're rushing it a bit. I would have liked to see I hope we still get some moments of maybe Ryan embracing some of his darker tendencies, because we have seen before moments where he's done stuff and he's, killed people. He killed his mother by accident. Now he's accidentally killed an actor. Are we going to see Ryan start to shed some of that care? Are we going to see him shed that remorse? Or is he just going to, continue to have this humanity in him that isn't there? But also, Ryan's an anomaly. He's the only soup that wasn't given powers in a lab. He was born with them, and because of that, it's a very different scenario than the other soups who are mostly doing this for their own selfish reasons. Ryan doesn't get to control whether he has powers or not. He's just born with them, and he has to deal with them, and I think we're really starting to see how detrimental that really is for him. So I really like what they're doing with that dynamic. I think it's really interesting so far. It's going in directions already that I didn't expect them to go this early on, so I'm wondering, how long is this gonna last? Is he going to, are we gonna see Ryan abandon Homelander even in this season? Is it going to happen earlier than we think? I don't know. I hope that's not the case, because I want to see more of this dynamic. I feel like we've seen scenes between these two before, but seeing Ryan at Vaught's, I want to see more of what that really entails. I just hope they're not rushing through that. So that's really my only worry with that, is that I hope they're not rushing through that plot line. But other than that, I like what they're doing with that character so far. The most interesting part of this episode for me, though, is what they're doing with A-Train this season. I think is very interesting and really does feel like it makes sense for this character. You remember that moment at the end of episode 8 where his brother lashes out at him and talks about how he doesn't want him in his life anymore and how he's just making things worse and how he isn't the hero everybody says he is. And it feels like it has awakened something within A-Train. He's starting to now kind of realize that his version of who he wants to be, it's just not who he is. He had, from the first scene of this episode where we see that his life, his backstory is being rewritten. He's being propped up as like a stereotypical, a stereotypical kid who was like, whose family was like into drugs and things like that, when really his dad worked at like a burger place, and how much that is affecting him. But then especially the scene that really I thought was interesting is when he's talking to his brother and his kids, and his brother's kids look up to him as this hero, but his brother isn't having it. He's calling him out, and he's saying that no, he's not this hero. All those things that you saw him do, they were all staged. None of the savings that he did were actually real. And so I think A-Train is really just starting to realize just how much of a phony he really is. He's never been this superhero. He's never been someone who is, he's never done all these great things. A lot of it has been complete bullshit, and I think he's really starting to confront himself about that. I think the most shocking moment, of course, is what ends up happening with Annie and Huey, where he generally, gives the file over to Annie and Huey and lets them know, that he doesn't want this to happen. Like, he actually seems like he's making an effort to fix the situation for Annie. He makes sure that she can, he makes sure that she can completely, clear the names of those guys. And so it really does seem like A-Train is trying to look into himself a bit more. And I'm wondering if he's going down this redemption path of sorts. And I think it's really interesting to see. He's also, we see he's getting fed up with Homelander. He's just calling him like this bloodthirsty, sociopath, thing, what he said, and things like that. And it's just really interesting what they're doing with him. I think it's not at all, it's kind of the direction I thought, but to be honest, like, A-Train up to this point has not been a character that has been as prominent as I've ever wanted him to be. I've always liked the character. I've just never really felt like they have done the best with him, and it feels like this season they really are leaning heavily into what can we do to really develop A-Train as a character. And I'm wondering if by the end of this, is he going to be like a Maeve or an Annie where he's just fully done with the Seven? I don't know if that's going to happen, but I could very well see them doing that with the way things are really happening. I mean, he literally helps out Annie and Huey and makes sure that they get that proof that the riot was not incited by the Starlighters. And I mean, just doing that alone, this makes Annie kind of realize that, like, hey, if A-Train is going to do this noble thing, I also need to do this noble thing. He's going to help out people. I need to also help out people. I can't be hiding. I can't be a hypocrite and things like that. And so, again, I really like what they're doing with this character so far. And I'm interested to see, I'm very intrigued to see where they take his storyline moving forward, because I think by far it is easily one of the most interesting storylines of this season. I also somehow completely forgot about the whole reveal of who Black Noir 2 is. So we spend, the whole episode 1, and we're so, confused as to how he got here and things like that. Turns out he's just an actor for, he's literally just an actor for Black Noir who barely understands the character, keeps talking too much, and doesn't like the fact that Homelander kills too many people. And I think that is just such a genius idea. The fact that they would just get this random actor to sub in for Black Noir, acting like nothing's wrong. It's just, one, totally seems like something Vought would do, perfectly in line with the shit Vought has done before. But it also, again, just really helps satirize so much of what this show is doing. I think they're very much trying to hint at the idea of, I think they're kind of trying to make jabs at, recastings for characters that don't make sense, but, kind of do their own little spin on it. And the funniest part of it all is that it's still Nathan Mitchell behind the mask. Like, it's still the exact same actor. It's just now he gets to talk. So he actually has like a lot more to play around with, and I think actually has like a much more livelier performance. Not to say I didn't like Black Noir in the other seasons. I really did, especially season 3. But I just really like this different take on this character. I'm excited to see how this affects the dynamic overall. So I think it's a really fun idea. I think it's a way to, dial up the comedic sensibilities of the show, but also change up the dynamic in a really, really fun way. It would have been really easy to just get Black Noir again and just have him do the same thing. But again, instead they have this random actor and they have this really funny reveal. And it really just, I thought, just made it so much more entertaining as a result. But then we go to the Sister Sage of it all, and oh my god, I am just loving this character. I mean, the way that she has gone into the 7, and she pretty much already is controlling everyone alongside her. I mean, she's getting everybody to admit things that they haven't admitted before. The scene she has with Ashley, where she's telling, something as simple as like when she tells Ashley that she can tell how deathly terrified she is of Homelander and that she needs to start sucking up to him because she's going to end up just like Madeline. And I agree. I think that's what's going to happen. I think Homelander is eventually going to snap and end up killing Ashley just because of, again, how little of care he has for anybody, and that's what he does when he finds out something. I think something will end up happening there. But especially when it came to what she says about Ryan, where she talks about how Ryan is somebody that is typically propped up by the media because of their obsession with broken white guys and things, broken white boys and things like that. I thought that was a very effective moment. But especially with the Deep, I'm really liking this dynamic a lot. It's a very unexpected one, but it is giving the Deep easily the most interesting stuff he has had in this show in a very long time, where Sister Sage is finally getting him to, like, just kind of put his foot down. Like, why are you willing to let people walk all over you? Why are you letting Ashley tell you what to do? And he finally just, like, lays into her, and I do not think this is going to go well for the Deep, even though he has this newfound confidence in him, and even though Sister Sage is getting him to embrace it, I don't see this going well. I think Homelander is going to become aware of what he's doing, and he's going to put a stop to that, and I don't know if the Deep is going to make it through this season. I really don't, especially the fact that, like, the previous scene, there was a mention of him and Ambrosius, like, running away together. I really don't think this is going to end well for the Deep, and if that's where they're going, I mean, I'm really here for that, but especially with what I think is Sister Sage's overall plan, I don't think she's here at all to get into the 7. I think her entire mission is to find every crack she possibly can within the 7 and just completely dismantle it. I think that there is some sort of hate, there is some sort of feelings that she is harboring towards them, whether something happened to her, whether she herself is maybe a part of, this operation that, like, Mallory and all of them are a part of, whether she's undercover for them, or whether she just has seen the 7 and is tired of them constantly controlling everything and wants to take down Vought, and her way of doing that is turning everybody against each other. I'm just really loving this character so far. I feel like she came in here and is just kind of, and she's kind of just blowing me away. I said it before, Susan Heyward is just so good in this role, but this episode especially, it just really reminds me how much I'm liking this character so far. I'm just very curious on where they're going with her as a character. I feel like, especially if they're gonna do what I think they're gonna do, oh my god, this season is going to be one to watch, because I don't think this is gonna work out. I don't think Homelander is going to like the fact that she just is literally saying the thing that everybody else is afraid to say. Like, that's what she does so far, and the fact that she already is, like, staking her claim into the 7 and making sure that, certain, and really just getting everyone to confront these things that they've never, done before. It's just going to be really interesting to see what her overall goal is here, because I don't think it is at all to help Homelander. I don't think that's at all what she's doing. I think she absolutely has her own agenda, and I'm interested to see how that goes. And I could generally see a scenario where her power does supersede him, because she is the most powerful, she's the smartest person in the world, and he isn't. And I don't think she's going to be able to take down as easily as Homelander thinks she is. So I think if we do get to that point, I think we could have a really compelling dynamic going on there, and I just really like what's going on. But I also got to talk about Firecracker here, who I really like what they're doing with her as well, where, yes, she is this raging conspiracy theorist that is just spouting out the most ridiculous stuff, but I really like what she says in this episode to Sister Sage, where she asks her, like, why are you doing all this stuff? What are you really trying to do? And Firecracker basically admits that, like, people just need a purpose in life. They need something to latch onto, and that just makes perfect sense, because why do people attach themselves to conspiracy theories? Why do people get so invested in them? Why are they so willing to, stand? Why are they so passionate about these theories that very often hold very little weight to them? Because they feel like they're a part of something. And I think that is such an interesting idea with what they're doing with Firecracker. But there's also so much more going on with her. There's a reason that she has this hatred towards Starlight. There's a reason that she feels the way she does about certain things. And I'm very excited. I really am looking forward to seeing what else they're going to do with her moving forward, because we know she's going to join the Seven. It's just a matter of how she joins the Seven, and I'm interested to see how that all really does go down. So I really like what they're overall doing with this character so far. Also, the Will Ferrell cameo, I mean, again, just another example of what The Boys does best. Just inserting the most random actor and just having them perfectly fit into the scene. The idea that Will Ferrell is going to be in this serious biopic about A-Train's life, and this is going to be like his Oscar-worthy performance, but they're worried that he's becoming too, like, white savior-y. I mean, it's just such a funny idea overall, and I really love the way they are leaned into that in this episode. Every time they do like a promotion for something the Seven is doing, it always is so funny to watch because of how insincere it is, but this was easily one of the funniest to date. I knew from the second that started that it was probably something that they were filming, but again, it really is doing a lot for A-Train as a character and pushing him forward in a way I didn't expect. So it's still very funny, but it also has a purpose to it, like almost like everything in this show has so far. I think that's something this show does so well, is all the ridiculous and funny moments. It all has a purpose to it in the end, and I think that's really no different when it comes to this scene. So overall, lots of stuff to talk about within this episode. I mentioned it before, the action in this show has always been great, but I'm just really loving how vital every single action scene really does feel, whether it was the opening scene of the last episode or the scene with Splinter here. They're really just going all out, even if it is so wild and crazy and over the top. There still is, like I said, this sense of urgency that I think is really pushing things forward, and that's something that I really just enjoy about this season so far, and I think they're doing that really well when it comes to the political jabs and things like that. I don't think it is I don't think it is overshadowing everything else the show is doing. I've seen people say that they feel it's overtaking the show and that, everything else is just kind of taking a back seat. And I just don't think that's the case. Yes, you have a character like Firecracker, who her entire thing is that she's this, right-wing conspiracy theorist. Yes, that is, who she is, but there's still a purpose there. There's a reason why she is like this. They're really trying to commentate on the idea of, like, both of these sides going at each other and hurling all these insults at each other and things like that. And I like what the show is overall trying to do so far. The commentary that they are trying to present about, conspiracy theories and these radicalist groups and things like that. I think it's really fascinating. You can tell that Kripke has really put a lot of effort into it. It doesn't just feel like he is just inserting things to insert them. It actually feels like it has a purpose in this season, and that's something I really do enjoy. But also, again, just how every single character has something to do. I think Frenchie's storyline is really intriguing. I really am interested to see how that ends up playing out. What they're doing with Huey this season, kind of diving into this fractured relationship with his mom and how that all ends up going down and what really happened there that caused her to leave. I think we're going to dive deeper into that for sure. But also when it comes to Butcher and MM, I mean, are these two going to stay at odds with each other? Is there ever gonna be some type of reconciliation there, or has that ship sailed? Is it true when MM says that, yeah, Butcher's a liability to us at this point, there's no reason to stay close to him? I'm interested. I don't know how that is all going to go moving forward. When it comes to Ryan and Homelander, I really like the dynamic that's going on there, and also how much that is already affecting Ryan and what that is doing for him. You know, I feel like I said, he's gonna leave very soon. But then but then you throw in the Sister Sage of it all, and again, it just makes things so much more, and it just adds this level of tension, and it adds this layer to the show that just simply hasn't been there before. What it's doing for the Deep, especially as a character, I think is really interesting. But then what we're getting with A-Train, I'm really interested to see how that all plays out. I'm just really liking the season a lot. I think my only worry with this episode, really my only issue, is that I just think some plot points are happening a little too soon. I am hoping that they aren't rushing things with Homelander and Ryan. I'm hoping that's not the case. I'm hoping that we get a little bit more into things with Huey and with Huey and his mother. I think that dynamic is an interesting one, and I hope they do flesh that out. That's really my only concern with this season so far, is that I just think some things are feeling a little bit rushed. But other than that, I mean, this was pretty much a fantastic episode through and through. When I think about The Boys and what it does best, this episode is able to do that. It combines the lunacy and the over-the-top nature, but also having this grounded sense of character and this looming darkness throughout the season. I really think this season is going to go in a depressing direction, and I'm kind of here for it, because I feel like it really does feel earned in that way. So again, I think another fantastic episode, slightly better than the first in my opinion. I really enjoyed the first episode, but I think this one was even better and gave us a better idea of what the season is really going to all be about. So I just really liked what we are getting this season. I'm excited to see what this last episode of the 3 that we got ends up being, but overall, with all that said, I am going to give this episode of The Boys, Season 4, Episode 2, Life Among the Skeptics, an A-. Alright, so it's been a little bit, as you can see, a couple days have gone by, but I finally just got a chance to watch the 3rd episode of The Boys, Season 4, and holy shit, this episode is everything that I've enjoyed about these first 2 episodes, but I think really just giving us a more clear-cut idea of what this season is going to be. And if we're going the direction that I think we're going to, I generally do think, yeah, this might just end up being the best season yet, because I'm really just liking the way everything is shaking out. But we're gonna go ahead and just jump into it right now. So while I've been talking mostly about like The Boys and Soup stuff separately, there's a lot of crossover in this episode, so I'm mainly just gonna get into the idea of like the main, like we have basically like 4 distinct storylines going on this episode, so I'm just going to go ahead and start off with what the boys' mission is in this one, where basically we really see MM take charge in this episode. He's really trying to step up and be this leader, one that is very authoritative and someone that really isn't letting any, while he wants to, you can see, have this power, and he wants to be the one that is the driving force and kind of the one dictating all of the, and kind of the one that is, figuring out all that they're going to do. You can already see that it's not really working out for him, because he has this plan in this episode where he wants to try to flip A-Train. He knows what happened in the last episode. He thinks that A-Train is very close to finally, understanding his motivations and trying to redeem himself, and he thinks that he can be the one to do it. And immediately, nobody's really down for this idea, especially Huey, who's like, hey, yes, he helped us, but he also killed my girlfriend. Like, A-Train's literally the reason that Huey joined, that's literally the reason why Huey even joined the boys. And you can see that he's not really here for it. Kimiko and Frenchie, they're off doing their own thing. So it's going to be really interesting to see MM in this position. I've hinted at in the past 2 episodes, but I really don't think this is going to be working for him. I think he's honestly a bit in over his head. And I think we're really seeing that in this episode, where nobody really likes the fact that he's in this position. They don't like the fact that he is trying to make, that he is the one making all the calls, that he's the one trying to, tell them what to do. They don't like that. They wish that they were able to just kind of do their own thing, and it kind of makes me think that his position as a leader isn't really going to work out. I'm hoping it does, because I like what we see in this episode with MM. I like that he has, that he's able to call the shots, but it seems like they don't like the fact that he's calling the shots. So it's going to be interesting to see how that all plays out. But basically, he does go to A-Train, and MM here basically suspects everything that we've been kind of suspecting about A-Train, where he is showing these clear signs of guilt. He's showing that he has this, very clear regret for what he's doing, this PTSD that's haunting him, and he is kind of feeling like he can finally start anew. And you can see that A-Train doesn't want to admit it. He's not ready to do that. He's talking about how, he just doesn't really want to, he just isn't really ready to face that yet. And I think that A-Train right now is kind of ashamed that he's feeling this way, because all his life he has thought that he is this superhero. All his life he has thought that he's this good person. And now he's starting to realize that he isn't. And he hates that. He doesn't like the fact that all these good deeds are killing, all the things that he's doing have constantly resulted in people dying, and the things that he thought was good wasn't. And I like when I love that line of A-Train saying that, like, he's not helping, and MM says, well, you're still standing here. He hasn't run away from the conversation yet. So it shows that A-Train, he's definitely wavering. Like, he's ready to break away from all of this, but he just isn't, like, he wants to break away from all this, he just isn't ready to yet. And I'm really interested in seeing more of this dynamic. I like seeing MM being this person that can easily persuade people, and someone who is able to get inside their psyche. I think that's a really good role for him that we really haven't seen before, and this is exactly what I want to see with him being the leader and kind of stepping up. But the one thing that A-Train does reveal, however, is this rendezvous of sorts that Newman is going to be involved in, and this leads them to this ice rink where, oh my god, I mean, you just want to talk about the boys at its absolute grisliness in terms of mayhem. Look no further than the scene where they go to this ice rink where this there's this performance going on where people are pretending to be the Seven, but they're talking about, like, Christmas being canceled and things like that. Again, further diving into, like, social commentary and things like that, which I thought was just so on point, the way they handled that. I'll talk a little more about that a little bit later. Huey ends up in this, like, ventilation shaft, and he is caught by Homelander based on the sweat that's dripping down, and basically he nearly ends up lasering him, but but instead ends up missing and lasers basically the entire cast of this, like, ice thing that's going on. And my god, that scene was insane. The way it was, like, he accidentally, killed one person, and then it just turned to this domino effect where everyone was falling, slicing each other in half with their, like, with their shoes and things like that. I just thought that was absolutely insane, the way that went down. But again, it's what The Boys does best in terms of violence and carnage, and I love the way that whole scene played out. But basically, Huey nearly is killed here, but A-Train ends up saving him in this moment, and he doesn't really understand why. Huey's, when Huey says, "Why'd you save me?" A-Train doesn't really know, so you can see that he clearly is trying to do good. What MM said is having an impact on him, but I don't think Huey is fully convinced yet. I don't think he's fully ready to accept the fact that, yes, A-Train can join our side and we can trust him. I don't think he's at that point. But I think he's slowly getting there, and I thought all of this was just really interesting, the way this all played out. I really like, again, seeing MM in this power position, but also what they're doing with A-Train, I think is just really interesting to see so far. Now, on the other side of things, we have Butcher, who in this episode, he's fully veered away from the boys at this point, and his main mission is all about Ryan. He needs to figure out what to do about Ryan. He sees that he is now being proclaimed to potentially be one of the Seven, and he doesn't like that, and Kessler, you see, has this very sort of dangerous method of what we need to do in order to subdue Ryan is to simply drug him, because if he's high, he will do whatever we want. We will get him to cave and admit things, and it seemed like Butcher was going to go through with this. This seems perfectly in line with something that Butcher would have done, earlier on in the series, but we really do see how much Butcher has changed as a person, because he has this conversation with Ryan where Ryan ends up admitting to him what happened with the guy that he was supposed to throw, and that he threw him too hard and ended up killing him, and how he's feeling this, guilt. He's feeling this, he's terrified at what he can really become. He doesn't like that this is happening, and we have this really sweet moment between the two of them where, Butcher talks about how he's a terrible father and how he thinks that, he should be ashamed of him, but Ryan says he's not ashamed of him. You can see that there is a genuine bond between these two. There is a genuine love there, and I really loved getting to see that. I love the moment where Ryan's playing this video game and things like that, and Butcher is also playing this game, and they're kind of bonding through that. I just thought it was really sweet, the directions that they decided to go in, and I like that Butcher was able to, it seems, get to Ryan. Again, like I said, I'm just hoping they're not rushing this storyline, because I like what we're getting. I want to see Ryan, I want to at least see Ryan try to embrace his role in the Seven more. I want to see that happen, and then something else occurs, and then he can go to Butcher. I don't want to see him go fully towards Butcher yet. It doesn't seem like we're getting there. He's still with Homelander by the end of this episode. But I just hope that they're not rushing this too quickly. It is giving us some really introspective moments between Butcher and Ryan, where it seems like Ryan's kind of getting Butcher to see some things that he didn't see before. And there's even, Ryan, straight up asks him in this moment, if he's afraid of dying, and Butcher talks about that he is, but Ryan doesn't think that he is. It seems like, Ryan and Butcher, they understand each other really well, and I think that's something we're going to see more of in this series, is that the two of them just have this understanding of each other, despite the fact that maybe things didn't work out at first. Now that Butcher is generally making an effort to try to save Ryan, I think Ryan is seeing that, and I think that is going to help Ryan not be fully lured into what Homelander is doing. He's not going to be able to, Homelander's not going to be able to have that relation with Ryan, because he just doesn't understand Ryan in that way, whereas Butcher does. And I think the thing that I think what it was before, because as we've seen prior to this show, a lot of the time when Butcher tried to get to Ryan, it wasn't working. I think it's because he didn't think that Butcher cared, and now Butcher is showing that he does care. And when he talks about that he's this monster and things like that, again, Ryan is saying that he isn't, and that compared to Homelander, who's telling him to be emotionless and not show any care, Butcher is encouraging it, and that's exactly what Ryan needs to hear. And I think, again, this was just a really great scene between them, and I love that Butcher ends up not going through with the drugging. He throws out the cookies, saying that he overdid it, and Kessler's not happy about this. Kessler tells him that, time is running out. He gives him this ultimatum that either they're going to try to train Ryan to kill Homelander, or they're going to have to try to find a way to kill Ryan themselves. So I'm interested to see how this is all going to go down. I have heard people kind of theorize that maybe Kessler isn't real, that we've only seen Kessler interact with Butcher. I don't know if I'm willing to buy into that yet. It's only been 3 episodes. We've only seen him in 2 of them. I need to see more of the scenes between them, but I will say that theory does make me want to analyze their scenes together a little bit more, try to pick up on some hints that maybe Kessler isn't real, and maybe this is just a figment of Butcher, and maybe this is kind of maybe Kessler is Butcher's way of, leaning into his worst instincts, leaning into his worst impulses, because all the things that Kessler is saying to Butcher, I think is stuff that Butcher has thought. I think this is stuff that Butcher is thinking about, but I think that Kessler kind of, if he does turn out to be fake, I think Kessler is what is holding back Butcher from fully turning into a better person. And I think that Butcher needs to resist that temptation as a way to try to turn into a better person. And I think we're seeing that throughout the season. So again, I'm not entirely sure if Kessler's real or not. I do think it's an interesting theory to suggest that maybe he isn't, and it is instead just like this sort of like the devil on Butcher's shoulder in that way. I think that's a really interesting idea. But I'm not fully convinced that that is the case. We will have to see. Either way, I love what they're doing with Butcher this season. I love the sort of directions he's going, and it really does seem like he is trying to be a better person and also just be a better father to Ryan, and it seems like, so far at least, he is making a genuine effort in doing that. Now, the other storylines we have going on with the boys here, we have to talk about what's going on with Frenchie in this episode. I love the way they are handling this storyline. The way that, you know, what he did to Colin's family is eating away at him to the point where now he is visualizing all of them being brutalized and murdered. I mean, that whole sequence was so harrowing to watch, and you can see how much this is just absolutely breaking him. And there's a point where it seems like Frenchie is going to admit to Colin what's going on, but instead he just decides to make out with him and isn't really opening up about anything. And, you know, I think it's gonna be, he's not even telling Kimiko about it at this point. There's a point where it seems like he's going to open up to her, but he isn't, and neither is Kimiko. Kimiko is fully trying to dive into what the therapist told her about exploring her past and feeling like she has to kill as many human traffickers as she possibly can. And like I said, there's this moment between Frenchie and Kimiko where it seems like they're both going to open up to each other about what's going on. There's this girl that Kimiko recognizes, and you know, Frenchie seems like he's going to go after her, but Kimiko stops him from doing so, doesn't want to tell him who she is. And I think this is a really interesting idea, that their past is preventing them from, you know, that both of them are so ashamed by things that have gone down within their past that they can't talk to each other about what's going on. This is the first time the entire show that Frenchie and Kimiko are really not in a great place as friends. And so that's something that I'm very interested in seeing how that's all going to play out. I feel like we just had a whole season of the two of them flirting with the idea of whether or not to get together, but now it seems like they are so far apart from each other in terms of their own sort of demons that they're facing that they can't possibly work it out, and I don't know how that's all going to play out moving forward, but I really like the way they're handling this storyline so far. It's different from what we've seen from Frenchie and Kimiko, especially, like I said, everything that's going on with him and Colin. I think that adds a new layer that we haven't seen. Kimiko is the storyline I'm still trying to figure out where they're really going with it at this point. I feel like we're getting fragments of what's going on, but I don't have a full understanding of what they're really doing, other than, like I said, her going after these human traffickers to reconcile with her past. I'm interested to see how this all plays out moving forward, because I like what they're doing with both these characters. I kind of just need to see more of what they're really doing overall. And then when it comes to Huey, we get a little bit more in this episode regarding his mother. We find out that there really isn't much he can do legally to oust her from the position that she's in, so that doesn't really work out. But then we get this moment towards the end of the episode where he asks her, like, why? You know, straight up asks, just, you know, generally wants to know why she decided to leave, and her reasoning is far more understandable than you would think. It turns out that she, after having Huey, had this postpartum depression, and she tried to hide it as much as she possibly could, so he really never noticed it. She tried to do what she can to conceal it from him, but it just got to a point where she couldn't anymore, and she ran away. And not only that, but Huey Sr. swore off all contact. He didn't feel that she was fit to be a mother. He didn't want Frenchie. He didn't want Huey. I keep saying Frenchie. He didn't want Huey to have to deal with that burden, and so he did what he can to hide her. And I think this is a lot more understandable now, where, like, she wanted to get in contact with Huey, but because of all that had happened, his father just didn't feel like she was in the right position to do so. And so, she, even though it was encouraged, he didn't, even though she made an effort, he didn't encourage it. And so that's why the two of them never really had a relationship. And I think this is going to get Huey to kind of struggle with this idea of forgiveness. And what I like about this is that it kind of mirrors what's going on with A-Train, somebody else that he doesn't want to forgive. Is Huey willing to put aside all of the bad memories and trauma that he's faced from both of these people in his life and willing to forgive them? And I think that's going to be a big storyline moving forward that we really haven't touched upon with Huey before. I've heard people say that they don't understand why Huey is still in the show, and I think it's for stuff like this. We've never really seen him get to this point of forgiveness with anybody in his life. Anybody that has wronged him, he has felt, he has felt this, he's harbored a lot of anger towards. And I think now that he understands more of what really happened with his mother and why she decided to leave, I think now we're going to see him kind of reconcile with the idea of forgiving her. Is he willing to do that? Is that something that is possible for him? That's something that I think is going to be a really intriguing storyline, and I think again will put Huey in a much different direction as a character than we've seen before. So I really like what's going on there. Now, when it comes to the Seven in this episode, there's a lot to talk about. The big thing is that at this point, Sister Sage and Firecracker, they have officially become members of the Seven. They didn't really give an explanation as to how Firecracker assumed that position. I would think it's just, they've witnessed what she's been doing and they see how powerful she is and how everyone is willing to listen to her and they feel like she'd be a good fit. But basically, she's coming in saying some really out-of-pocket stuff, but Sister Sage feels that this is good because it gets people to focus away from Homelander and what he's really doing. That's the big thing here, is that Homelander doesn't need, can use this as a distraction. He can do whatever he wants and nobody's really going to notice it because they're just going to be paying attention to all the stuff that she is saying. And, at this point, like I said, Sage is in full control of basically everybody. She's kind of this mob boss of sorts, and it's really exciting to see. I like seeing, Homelander generally not have any power at this point, just kind of letting her do whatever she wants. There's a moment where Ashley in this episode is, willing to, is trying to, give her sort of 2 cents on what's going on, and Sister Sage doesn't want her to, so Homelander has no choice but to agree with her. And you can see that this is really starting to bother Homelander. He doesn't like the fact that he has very little say in what Sister Sage is doing. I think that when he wanted somebody to oppose him, I think he wanted like a back and forth that he had with like Edgar, for example. He liked that back and forth that they had because at least then he could argue with him. He can't argue with Sister Sage because she's the smartest person in the world, but also she seems to be controlling literally everybody around her. And I think this is such an interesting idea. And what they're doing with Ashley also really intrigues me. I'm wondering if she's going to crack this season. We can see throughout the show, she's been trying her best to hold everything together. All of the, just carnage and all of the terrible shit that that the Seven have been involved in. She has been doing whatever she can to possibly cover it up, but also has been has been so subservient to Homelander, and she's now getting to a point where I don't know if she can really take it anymore. She has this letter of resignation. It seems like she's going to go ahead and sign it, but once she sees Homelander kill one of Annie's, previous friends who was going to openly admit like what happened and everything that went down and probably oust A-Train, you see that Ashley shreds it. And I don't think this is because of the fact that Ashley, again, likes what Homelander's doing. I think she's generally terrified. I think she knows the second that she leaves, she's going to be the next one that is lasered. Like, she's terrified of what's going to happen to her. And I think we're seeing this vulnerability within her character that we really just haven't before. They've hinted at it in season 3 with her kind of going bald and literally pulling her hair out. But I think now that she's seeing just how powerful things have gone and also how out of control things have gone. She's realizing she can't really handle it anymore, and I think that's a really interesting story for her overall. I'm really I really, that's definitely a storyline that I'm very intrigued to see where it's gonna go, because I like what they're doing with her character overall. I think there's some really interesting stuff going on there. And then when it comes to Homelander in this episode, like I said, I mean, I think he's just getting really fed up by what is going on. We see that there's a moment where he is trying to do what he can to because he saw Annie's friend as a spy. That's what he thought she was, when in reality she was just a Vought employee. That's all she really was. But he's gotten to the point where he's really starting to lose his shit, even more so than we've seen in these first 2 episodes. And by the end of the episode, he is able to figure out that Ryan is in fact still hanging out with Butcher. He doesn't like the fact this is going on, but he also realizes that there isn't much he can do. He's lashing out at him. He's asking him why he isn't grateful, why he is, he's giving him everything. Why isn't he happy about it? And I think, again, Homelander doesn't seem to care about the fact that he has shown very little sympathy towards him. He hasn't, Ryan's never going to be able to sit down and have this conversation with Homelander about his guilt, and Homelander tell him that that's okay. Instead, Homelander's telling him to repress those feelings, and that's why those two aren't having that relationship. And this leads Homelander to have this confrontation with himself, which we haven't seen something like this in a while. We've seen it before on the show, but it's been quite a bit, where he is talking to, it almost is kind of like, and maybe this is just because I just rewatched all the Lord of the Rings movies in theaters, but it almost is like Gollum and Schmeagol, where you have like the you have the selfish side of him, and then you have that like more selfless side of him, and he's kind of, but instead it's him battling between this cold, bloodthirsty killer with someone who wants to feel genuine love, and who wants to feel generally loved and appreciated by people, and how he is wrestling with both of those things, and basically gets to a point where he's realizing, in order for him to be able to fully come to terms with it and be able to stop feeling all of this be able to stop feeling so unsatisfied with everything going on in his life and continuing to just completely crack under the pressure, he's going to have to go home. And I'm pretty sure what they are implying here, because we kind of saw it in episode 1, is that we're going to get a deeper exploration of Homelander's childhood, him being in this lab, what he really had to endure, what all of that, how he's really gone to this point. I think we're going to see a deeper exploration of that this season, and I'm very much here for it, because I think it's going to give us that window into how Homelander became the way he was that maybe we just haven't really seen on this show before. We know that the whole thing with him is that he wants to be loved and accepted by people, but how did that really come to be? How did that really all happen? Is it just because of what his father did, or was there more to it? I think we're going to see more of that this season. That's something I'm just really interested in getting into. And as usual, Antony Starr, just phenomenal in this show. I love the work that he is doing. I love the effort that he's putting into this character. And the last few minutes here, are easily some of his most chilling stuff to date. Because like I said, when Homelander is at his absolute worst, literally nobody is safe at that point. And I'm just waiting, and seeing what he did to Annika and doing it without hesitation in that way, I'm just really scared to see what exactly this is going to, what exactly this all entails. What is his real mission here? How is this all going to play out? That's something I'm really interested to see, but also utterly terrified to see. But the other big development comes in the form of Firecracker in this episode, who up to this point in the show, we have seen her be this really radical sort of figure who is spouting the most ridiculous theories at all the different controversies you can think of, but underneath all of that, we have seen this hatred towards Starlight. There has been this but underneath all of that, there has been this consistency of her trying to turn everybody against Starlight, and this hatred she has towards her. And we see in this episode what that is really all about, because Annie goes to confront her and just doesn't understand what her obsession is with her. Why do you constantly want to turn the public against me? What is the whole reasoning? And we find out in this episode that their beef goes all the way back to when they were 13 years old. As we know, this is when Annie was heavily involved in pageantry and things like that, and Firecracker by then went by the name of Sparkler, and we find out that while she was involved in this pageantry, Annie directed a lot of insults towards her, and how there was this scrutiny and ridicule directed at her. And when she confronted Annie about it, rather than Annie try to apologize, instead Annie just said that she isn't friends with, basically in her words, said she isn't friends with fat sluts, and basically insulting her upbringing as well as her personality and all that she went through. And what I like about this a lot is that it takes the character of Firecracker and isn't justifying what she's doing, but it does get you to understand why she would feel the way she does about Annie, and also really plays into the idea of her wanting to be this springboard for making sure that people have something to invest in. She is trying to do what she can to alter her personality and alter her reputation in an effort to then bring down the person that has always been favored. You kind of see it as she's probably looked at Annie up to this point as, why was she the one that ended up becoming this hero? Why has everyone looked at her as this great person? Because she never had that experience with her, and she still feels that Annie to this day has that meanness in her, still has that bullying nature to her. And I don't think that she's completely in the wrong about this, because when she calls out Annie does not apologize here. What Annie instead says is, oh, I was immature, I was stupid, my mom was pressuring me to do it. And you can see this is not what Firecracker wanted to hear. Firecracker wanted her to just honestly admit that she was sorry. And I think this really just, again, plays into that idea of facing your past. Despite the fact that this happened when they were 13 years old, this has had a real impact on Firecracker. She's never really been able to be taken seriously. And so because of that, she's now had to become this, alt-right political activist of sorts, in an effort to, she's had to become this alt-right conspiracy theorist in an effort to, redeem her reputation, but also to take Starlight down. And it adds complexity to her character. Are we supposed to be condoning her actions and all the things that she's pursuing? No, we're supposed to laugh at it and think that she's ridiculous for thinking these things, but we also kind of understand why she would subject herself to that kind of thing, because she feels it's really the only way that people are going to notice her. She thinks it's the only way she's going to be able to redeem her reputation. I think deep down, I don't think Firecracker believes the things that she does. I think she generally doesn't like the fact that she has to spout these things. And I think she could have turned, I think right now, yes, Firecracker believes the things that she does, but I think in an alternate universe, she would have been a very different person. And I think that it all stems back to this this hateful comment that Annie said to her, how that has directed her entire life. That's something that I'm really interested in seeing, how this has kind of shaped her into becoming who she is. Like I said, it adds a dimension to her character that otherwise just wouldn't have been there. I think they could have easily just had this be something simple as, oh, well, I'm jealous of your success, but it goes back far deeper than that. It's so much more than just, you were successful and I wasn't. It was, you insulted me, you stopped me from, having that success. You did whatever you possibly could to make sure that I didn't win, and when I confronted you about it, instead of you admitting that you did it, basically did what you can to, further deepen the wound. And I'm really interested to see how this is going to go. I don't think this is something that Annie ever thought that she'd have to face again. I think she thought that these days were far behind her. Her mother's dead. She doesn't have to think about these days of her being in pageantry, but I think she's really going to have to realize that, no, I did hurt some people. And I don't think that, the thing that I'm interested in is Firecracker an isolated incident? Is what she did to Firecracker the only example of her being openly hostile towards somebody in this industry? Because I got the impression that this is something that her mom told her to do, and I think that there's going to be a lot of people who also harbor that anger towards her. So I'm really interested in seeing how they end up going about this. I think this is a really interesting development. It takes Annie's character in a very different direction, but also, again, it adds layers to Firecracker that simply weren't there before. Someone who we just kind of saw as this out of her mind, one note, conspiracy theorist who is spouting the most ridiculous rhetoric. Now we kind of understand more of why she is that way. Yes, she has these causes that are ridiculous, that are insane, that she believes in, but I think, again, in a different light, she could have become just as beloved as Starlight, but because of what Annie did to her, it has, basically stopped her from achieving those things. It stifled her from achieving those things within her life, and we're really seeing how this has had this impact on her up to this point. So that is a storyline that I really want to see more of. I really like that we got an explanation here. I like that we don't have to have a whole season of, why is Firecracker like this? I really want to see more of how this all plays out, because I think there's a lot of different avenues they can take this storyline, and that's something that I'm just really interested in exploring. And especially now with Annie being propped up as, this savior of sorts, and she's someone that is fighting all of these great causes, and, she's the person that is being seen as a hero. You can understand why Firecracker feels the way that she does, why she is so angered at the way that she is being portrayed, because nobody realizes all the things that Starlight did to her all those years ago. And despite the fact that they were 13, it has followed her since then. She's never really been able to fully escape that. And again, it adds this deeper level to both of these characters that we just haven't really seen before. We've seen Annie talk about how toxic her mother was. We've seen her talk about how, emotionally all the emotional abuse she had to deal with, how, we know that what she's had to deal with the deep and things like that. We know how she has constantly been, how every time it seems like something good has happened, she's always had to, there's always been somebody that has put a stop to it, whether it was Homelander, whether it was the deep, whether it was her mother. But now we're seeing something that Annie directly caused. And I think that adds such an interesting layer to a storyline where she is trying to abandon the Starlight persona. Now we have even a deeper understanding of why that is, because I think that there's a lot of things that Annie did when she was Starlight that she's ashamed of. And now she has to And now she has to revisit those things, and you can see how hard that is for her to do that. And again, I really like where the storyline is going. I think it takes her character in a really interesting direction, but also gets us to kind of understand Firecracker a bit more and why she is the way she is. And that's something I'm really intrigued to see how they go about this storyline moving forward. And then really the only other things to talk about in this episode is getting into Sister Sage. We get this moment with the Deep where once again we see the Deep talking to Ambrosius, and Ambrosius is talking about how, she kind of again wants to get away from all of this, and he's not cleaning her tank and things like that, and feels that he is kind of being neglectful towards her. So again, I really do think we're hinting at the Deep getting killed this season. I just really think they're going down that path. But then what's even more interesting is the way things end with the Deep, where we see a very different Sister Sage at the end of this episode, who she's vegging on the couch. She's, just wants to watch Transformers 2. She's eating Outback. She is far more casual in her conversation than we have seen her up to this point. The Deep is, flirting with her, and the two of them end up hooking up, and I think they're going to go in this direction, and we see them pan to this instrument that Sister Sage has clearly, used, and it's all bloody, and I think what they are hinting at here is that in order for her to feel relaxed, in order for her to feel at ease with herself, she has to go as far as to literally lobotomize herself in order to feel like she can actually have fun and just relax and just let loose, because I think her intelligence prevents her from being able to do that. She's always thinking of, she's always having to think. She's always having to, utilize her knowledge in a way that she doesn't. And I think that she doesn't like that. I think we're seeing this weakness within Sister Sage, that she really just wants to have fun and let loose. And the only way she's able to do that is by, like I said, literally just stabbing herself in the brain or whatever. That's literally the only way she's able to do it. And what I do think that this is not going to be a permanent thing. I think this is something that Sister Sage regularly indulges in. I think we're gonna find that out. But this is really interesting because it's showing that maybe she isn't always maybe she isn't always, proud of her abilities. Maybe there's a part of her that just wants to be able to have fun, but she isn't really able to. It kind of presents this layer to her that we haven't seen before, where, again, maybe she just wants to be able to just be a normal person and be able to engage in things that other people can't, be able to just, just kind of let herself let loose and just have fun, and she isn't really able to do that because of her abilities, and I think we do see that here. So that's something I'm very interested in getting more into, is what is Sister Sage all about? I think she still has this deeper plan. Like, I still very much do feel that her plan is to do what she can to make sure that the Seven implodes. I think that's what she's trying to do. She's trying to destroy Vought single-handedly, and I think, what this is that she kind of wants to find a way to just kind of relax and just kind of take a step, take a breather, and this is her only way of doing that. And again, I'm looking forward to seeing how that plays out. I love the work that Susan Heyward is doing on the show so far. I think Sister Sage is just such a instantly compelling character that continues to get more interesting as the episodes go on, and I can't wait to see what more they do with this character moving forward. So the last thing to really talk about here is with Newman. We don't get a ton with her in this episode, but we get a little bit more of an idea of what is she really up against? What is she really going to have to deal with if she decides to settle into this position as vice president? And we get a look in this episode of what is her being vice president really going to entail? What should she be prepared for? And well, I think we see in this episode that things are not going to end well when it comes to Robert Singer here, because his whole plan is basically that he wants to try to demilitarize the Supes. He doesn't want them involved in any real political power. He sees them solely as really entertainment. That's what they're here for. They're here to entertain. They're here to kind of spread their message to the masses, but he doesn't really want them making any sort of decisions. He wants them to be kind of just out on the sidelines, and while Newman at this point can just kind of smile and nod, obviously this very much affects her because she is a Supe, and so we see this moment with her and Sister Sage and Homelander, and they are trying to do what they can to counteract this. They don't want this to go forward, and it seems like they are trying to move forward in doing so, but I'm wondering how this is going to play out, because on one hand, we know that Newman is someone who is very persuasive, is someone that is easily able to persuade people into getting what she wants, and is able to make herself look like the victim and things like that, and does a great job with that. But then you also have Singer, who knows what she is involved in, knows exactly who she is, and so is she going to be able to catch on to this? How is this dynamic going to play out, this cat and mouse type game where both of them are really kind of sort of coming at each other, and it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out moving forward. Who is really going to have the upper hand? I think it's going to be Newman, and I think Singer is going to is going to die very soon. But knowing, what his plan is and that he is working with the CIA and things like that, but also how Sister Sage ties into it all, and if my theory is correct that she is maybe working with Mallory and Singer and all of them, is it possible that maybe this doesn't work out for Newman? Maybe things end up going awry for her. Are we going to see her experience failure for the first time where things don't end up working out for her? Is she going to be able to continue what she's been doing the whole show and get away with this scot-free? I don't really know how it's going to play out, but this is another really intriguing development. It really heightens the tension between these two. There is so much animosity between the two of them, and and the thing is, neither of them realizes how much the other is catching on. Newman doesn't realize that Singer is aware of her Supe abilities, and Singer doesn't realize that Newman is most likely 10 steps ahead of him and has a whole backing already that is going to make it nearly impossible for him to be able to move forward with this specific law. I don't really know how this is all going to go down, but I'm very much here for it because I really like the way this storyline is playing out so far. But overall, this was just a really strong episode. There was a lot to really enjoy about this one. I love what's going on, like I said, with Butcher. I think his character development is so good this season. There was a point for him where he could have easily done the wrong thing like he has all show, and yet he decides not to because he still sees the good in Ryan. He sees Ryan as somebody that he can pull to his side without having to get his hands dirty? And is that going to make things more complicated when it comes to Kessler? And is Kessler even real? Again, that's a theory I'm willing to look into. Is there actually merit to that? Or is it just that Kessler is someone who's very unhinged, and because of what he went through within the war and things like that, he doesn't have that guilty conscience that Butcher seems to have more of this season? I'm interested to see how that's all going to play out moving forward. And then when it comes to Homelander, I mean, what's really going to happen here? We know that he's talking about facing going back to the beginning, but how is that going to play out? Is he going to have to confront some things from his past that maybe he has repressed? Or is he going to or does he have some bigger plan of action that involves what happened then? I don't really know what's going to happen. Does that maybe tie into the Woods and Gen V? I mean, there's a lot of possibilities when it comes to how that particular storyline is going to play out. I do think that could potentially be how he gets Sam and Kate involved, because we know they're eventually going to show up on this show, and that's not something that we've seen yet. And so that's something that also I'm willing to look into, is how he's able to pull that off. But also Sister Sage's plan. What is her overall plan here? Does she actually care about what Homelander is doing? I'm willing to bet no, because everything she's doing is making things worse in the Seven. Every dynamic that she has called into question is sort of, making things that much more muddled for the Seven and make things that much more difficult overall. And so that's something I'm also interested to look into overall. But then when you add to the firecracker of it all, like I said, I think this is such an interesting sort of element. I don't know where they're taking that storyline, but it makes sense why we're focusing so heavily on Annie trying to abandon the Starlight persona. It isn't just because of the trauma that's associated with it. I think it's also because there's some things that she did in her past that maybe she isn't proud of, and she associates Starlight with that. And I think, based on now Firecracker trying to prove that she still has that, that she still has that meanness within her, and she still has that sort of vitriolic nature within her, is it going to be harder for her to abandon that? Now we see why she's more willing to embrace Starlight, and as she continues to do that, are we going to see that Annie still has that within her? I think that really also adds to a big theme of the show, which is always about good and evil. There really is no such thing as that. Everybody has both sides of them and are struggling with that. Nobody is as purely evil as Homelander, and nobody is as purely good as, well, up to this point, Annie. And I think that's something that we're really seeing in this show, and I think that that's something that this season is diving into really well, but also what it's saying about facing your past when it comes to Frenchie and him having to reconcile with him being this Jason Bourne type killer to now the person that he's dating, and how he's struggling to admit that. When it comes to Kimiko and her going after all of these human traffickers, where is that storyline all going? When it comes to A-Train and him having to face the fact that he hasn't been a good person up to this point, and he's killed a lot of people, and he's done a lot of things that has resulted in causing harm to others, and him now trying to become a better person. How hard is it for him going to be able to admit that? I think that's something that he is really struggling with, because he's feeling uneasy about it. He's feeling weird about it, and he doesn't really know how to go about that moving forward. So I'm interested in seeing how that's going to play out. Even MM, who now has been upgraded to a leader, you can see how he is kind of compromising his, how he is trying to struggle in doing so. Is he able to let go of his, worst qualities? Is he able to step into this role? Or is this going to become too challenging for him? And is that going to further hurt the dynamic of the boys moving forward? I think that's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out. But then also this idea of forgiveness with like Huey and things like that. I mean, there's just so many interesting layers that this season is diving into, and it's making for what is easily the densest season of this show yet. There's so much going on here, and yet I don't think it feels overstuffed. I don't think it feels like there's too much going on. It feels like everything does coalesce into this one theme, really, with this idea of facing your past, but also the idea of forgiveness. I think we're really seeing both of those things come into fruition this season, and I'm interested in diving deeper into that and what this season really ends up being, because, I mean, this is the last season before the final season of the show. So I feel like things are really going to start to come to a crescendo here. We're really going to start to see things come to a head. And how is that all going to play out? That is something I'm just really interested in diving further into. There's so many things there's so many conflicts that are on the line here. There's so many possibilities for where this season can go. And I feel like this episode just did such a great job of getting me to get that much more invested. I feel like this episode did such a great job of just finding a way to get me, someone that's already very invested in what's going on this season, that much more into what's happening. And I think they did I think that's something that this season is just doing a really great job with, adding these layers to these storylines, especially with like Firecracker and Huey's mom and things like that otherwise I think wouldn't have really been there. I just really love where the season is going so far, and I think this is just such a great episode overall. Whether it was the great social commentary that has been so consistent all season, especially the whole Vought on Ice thing, that was such a insane sort of scene, the way that all played out, but it really just combined just the great satirical nature, but also the ultra violence of the show. They combine those things so well, and that's something I really enjoy. But also, again, the way they're grounding it in character is something that I just continually am impressed by, and I can't wait to see where the rest of the season really does go. So overall, I just really love this episode a lot, and I'm going to give season 4, episode 3 of The Boys, keep the red flag flying here, overall in A. But over, guys, to my review of all 3 episodes of The Boys Season 4. Again, really excited to see where the rest of the season does go. Moving forward, I will be reviewing the show weekly. Cannot wait to see how all of this does end up playing out moving forward. Let me know what you guys are thinking this season overall, how you feel about all these different storylines are coming together, and really where you think everything is headed. There's still some things that I'm a bit uncertain of, and I just really am looking forward to seeing what's happening. I think really my only worry with this season is just I'm worried some things are happening a bit too quickly, but this episode did enough to ease my worries of that, and so I like where things are headed. But that's it for my review. Hope you guys enjoyed it. We'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye. Don't worry about your laundry.